Yo, what is up, guys? This is Commerce64. How you guys are doing today? I'm back with another video, and for this video, I'm gonna be talking about get, showing talking about how the Hanna Barbera cinematic universe should have been, what Warner Brothers should have done with the canceled, which is now canceled Hanna Barbera cinematic universe. Now, for those who don't know, Warner Brothers was planning to do a cinematic universe with characters from Hanna Barbera. You know, this the first starting point was the 2020 Scoob movie or 2021 movie Scoob movie that came out. And unfortunately, that movie was not well received and pretty much understandable because the movie was just too much of a cluster of a movie. Unfortunately, a clusterfuck. Unfortunately, excuse my language. That's pretty much what it was. It was pretty much a cluster. You know, this movie. The one of the main problems with the movie was just the movie would just cram too much in. And it didn't really feel much like a Scooby Doo movie. It basically was just like a Hanna Barbera cinematic universe. What the movie should have done, the movie should have been a straight up Scooby Doo standalone movie. You know. Now, this is something that I talked about in my How Nintendo Can Make a Cinematic Universe cinematic universe video. You can go check that video out. I might leave it in link in the description below. You know, but I mentioned how the Hanna Barbera cinematic universe failed because it tried to do too much at the same time, and they they basically jammed too much in the Scoob movie, and that's pretty much one of the reasons why the movie kind of failed. Because when people saw the movie, people were looking forward to seeing like an actual Scooby Doo themed movie. Not just just like Scooby Doo characters cross over other characters. They throw in Blue Falcon, Wacky Racers, Captain Caveman, and something Angels, Teen Angels, Captain Caveman and the Teen Angels. Yeah, I think that's what it's called. And and that's pretty much about it. And they had other Hanna Barbera characters make cameo appearances, like during the end credit scene, during the credit scenes, through Sky Souls and stuff like that. Screenshots. But overall, Scoob was just a mess of a movie. And that movie did not need to be the way it was. Now I'm going to be talking about how the Hanna Barbera cinematic universe should have been, basically. And unfortunately, since that it's been canceled because that Scoob failed, unfortunately, because the Hanna Barbera failed. They decided to pull the plug on the Hanna Barbera cinematic universe. Now, yeah, Scoob kind of did fail for obvious reasons. I mean, sure, I guess one of the big factors I guess we could say why Scoob failed was because the time it was released. The pandemic. But at the same time, I do think if let's say if the pandemic never existed, if COVID never existed, or let's say if Scoob was released in a later time where restrictions were lifted and and stuff, and we were able to go back to the theaters, like if Scoob was actually playable in an actual theater, Scoob was released like a video on demand, stuff like that, streaming, but if Scoob was released in a regular time, like even like either before the pandemic or even after or even before the pandemic, I do think Scoob probably would have got the same lukewarm reception that it already gotten, from people. I still probably think that. Because Scoob just kind of failed as many things. It failed as a Scooby Doo movie, and it failed as an action movie. And heck, Animat, I think he listed the movie as one of the worst movies of animated movies of 2020. Animat Electric Dragon 505. Yeah, he listed the movie as one of the worst animated movies of 2020. I kind of somewhat agree because Scoob, It did not feel like a Scooby Doo movie, and it pretty much kind of failed because you know Fred, Daphne, and Velma, they pretty much do nothing in the whole movie. They're pretty much kind of separated from Shaggy and Scooby for the most part. Shaggy and Scooby are pretty much team up with Blue Falcon and Dynamite through the whole movie, and you know, and then other stuff. There are a lot of other stuff in there, and like the relationship between Shaggy and Scooby kind of was a bit of a mess because Shaggy starts to get jealous of Scooby because Scooby he's more important and he important in the mission and all that stuff. Hey guys, I'm back. I'm so sorry, my bad. I had too much stuff on my SD card and I had to delete some stuff and make some more room and space, and I got more space now, so no more further interruptions and such. Just in case someone walks in or something, I can edit it or something. Oh yeah, so back to what I was saying now. So yeah, I guess Scoob did had some okay moments. The animation was pretty good and all. You know, and I guess that's probably about it. In terms of the characters were pretty much fine. They're pretty much themselves. I mean, for the most part. But Fred, Daphne, and Velma, they felt like they were kind of useless, honestly, because they're pretty much kind of sidelined, for most part of the movie, and that's pretty much about it. But overall, Scoob wasn't really a good movie. But I'm going to talk about what I think Scoob should have done, and what the whole cinematic universe, Hanna Harbera cinematic universe should have done, and what Warner Bros. Should have done, what everything should have done from the very beginning. So first off, Scoob should have been a straight up standalone Scooby Doo movie. No Blue Falcon, no characters from Wacky Racers, no Captain Caveman, Teen Angels, and no other Hanna Barbera characters, no nothing. If you want to have them make some kind of small little cameo, okay, sure, fine, whatever. As long as it's just not interfering with the full story, but just have it be a straight up Scooby Doo movie, and that's it. And you know what they could do, and this is another thing that I kind of mentioned in my how Nintendo can make a cinematic universe video, is what you can do for if you want to have Blue Falcon and Dynamite both appear in the Scoob movie, you could have them maybe appear in a mid credit scene or end credit scene, and that can lead off to a Blue Falcon solo movie, a Blue Falcon and Dynamite solo animated movie, something like that, and then you can build, and then maybe for this Blue Falcon / that Dynamite movie, that could be a solo Blue Falcon movie, and then you can have a mid credit scene that features Hong Kong Phooey or whatever Hanna Barbera character you want to adapt next into an animated movie. Have Hong Kong Phooey. I'm using that as an example. Hong Kong Phooey appear in the mid credit scene for Blue Falcon that can lead off to his own animated movie. Something like that. Or so on and so forth. Or I guess you do the Batman v Superman approach, and what I mean by that is Batman v Superman, how they introduced Wonder Woman in that movie and led off to her getting her own solo movie. I mean, even though her movie was pretty much like a flashback movie the whole time, and it pretty much, in continuity wise, it took place right before Batman v Superman years ago. Yes, they can do something like that. I guess another example is that Captain America: Civil War. That movie introduced both Black Panther and Spider-Man, Tom Holland's Spider-Man, and pretty much was a gateway leading off to their respective movies. Spider-Man, Tom Holland's Spider-Man, and Black Panther. So I guess Hanna Barbera could have done something like that. If they feel like the character probably wouldn't sell well on its own or something. Let's say they decide Hong Kong Phooey doesn't make a cameo appearance in either Scoob or Blue Falcon. Hey guys, I'm back. I'm sorry about that. My dad walked in because you need to get some hot water because we unfortunately don't have on the stove because we unfortunately don't have any hot water in the bathroom, unfortunately, or I don't know in the building. So yeah, we need some hot water to take showers and stuff like that. So fill up in a bucket and stuff, yeah, something like that. I'm sorry about that. But yeah, you know, so like let's say like if Hong Kong Fooey if he never like made a cameo appearance like in either a Scoob movie or a Blue Falcon movie, you know, and like if they decide to make a solo movie, anime movie based on Hong Kong Fooey, it probably wouldn't get a lot of people interested, because it's not going to give people a lot of drive to want to go to the theater to see it, you know. But if you have him make a cameo appearance in the Blue Falcon movie, or go the Batman v Superman approach and just have him like appear in the movie like later on near the end of the movie, and again a similar thing that both that Captain America Civil War did with both Black Panther and Spider Man, and heck even the Super Mario Bros. Galaxy movie did with Fox McCloud, you know, so you can have like where those you know you can have like you can have like Hong Kong Fooey like show up like somewhere mid near the end of the Blue Falcon movie, helping Blue Falcon and Dynamite out or something, or something like that, and the mid credit scene can lead off to him get his own solo movie, and that right there could probably push people to want to go see a Hong Kong Fooey movie, and I guess the Hong Kong Fooey movie could also be a lead off to Hong Kong Fooey movie can lead off to another Hanna Barbera movie, featuring another Hanna Barbera character or something. I don't know, you know, like a Yogi Bear movie, you know, and then like we get like a Flintstones movie and a Jetsons movie. Now you're probably wondering how could a Flintstones and a Jetsons work because the Flintstones and the Jetsons they both take place from different timelines. And sure, like Scoob, Yogi Bear, Hong Kong Fooey, Blue Falcon, and a couple others, they could probably still exist in the same world and such, in the same time period. But with the Flintstones and the Jetsons, it is kind of different because the Flintstones they take place in the past, and the Jetsons they take place in the future. So that is kind of a you struggle with that. But you can still have them take place in the same universe, but they can just be from different time periods. And now we're gonna get into like what if Hanna Barbera does a crossover movie with all the characters, Scoob, Yogi Bear, Hong Kong Fooey, Blue Falcon, the Flintstones, the Jetsons, Huckleberry Hound, SWAT Cats, Top Cat, that cowboy zebra, forgot his name, and a couple other characters, If Hanna Barbera wants to do a crossover movie with all those characters, that they can do that as like they can like save that for like much later on. Like that could be like Hanna Barbera's like Avengers or Justice League, like ultimate crossover special. Having all the Hanna Barbera characters come together and solve like some kind of mystery or something. Like let's say there's something that brings them all together and they need to try to they're facing up against like some kind of mysterious evil or something, and they all need to team up to try to take it down. You know, maybe a character that can be like somewhat of a Thanos level threat or a dark side level threat that they have to deal with or something, or it could be like something supernatural or something like or something like not supernatural, just some kind of evil. Like let's say like a mad scientist is coming up with an evil scheme for world domination, and they all need to team up to take that mad scientist down. Yeah, so and like and now if you want to add the Flintstones and the Jetsons in this crossover movie, Hanna Barbera crossover movie, here's one thing that you can definitely do. I first was thinking about the Flintstones, how what the Flintstones think work in Hanna Barbera cinematic universe, and now I'm starting to think the same thing with the Jetsons as well because one the Flintstone the bless you to myself one takes place in the past the Flintstones, and one takes place in the future, suggestions. And here's one thing that you can do: time travel. You can introduce time travel as like some kind of plot. Let's say like this Hanna Barbera crossover movie has something to do with time travel, like a evil mad scientist. He invents like a time machine or something, or he finds like some kind of object or something, ancient object that allows time travel, a person to go through time and stuff like that. Let's say the Hanna Barberas they come together to try to stop them. Like Blue Falcon recruits Mystery Inc., Hong Kong Fooey, and Yogi Bear and Boo Boo and them like to try to stop this mad scientist from using a time thing to go through time. They go after him, they get a hold of the time thing, and then but the time thing like activates and sends everybody back to different time periods. So let's say like Mystery Inc. Or or just Scooby and Shaggy, Mystery Inc. They get teleported back in time and end up in the era of the Flintstones, and they meet the Flintstones and some of the other Hanna-Barbera characters like Blue Falcon or in Hong Kong Fooey, and then they end up in the future and they meet the Jetsons, something like that. And then each party needs to team up and try to find a way to go back to their respective times. And also along the way, let's say along the way, Mystery Inc. They bring Fred Flintstone, and the rest of Flintstone's characters, with them to help them stop the mad scientists, something like that. As for like some kind of example, and like in the past, and like in the future, Blue Falcon he dynamite, and the rest kind of convinces the Jetsons or recruits them to help them go back to their time and stop the mad scientist. Because let's say the mad scientist he tries to do something with this time thing, and the time thing starts to affect all of time and reality, something like that. And all the Hanna-Barberas need to team up and to stop him. Like they go through this, end up in this time period thingy of all time, and they defeat the mad scientist, and then everybody gets returned back to their time periods, back to their timelines, something like that. That's one example, like how, like if you want to add the Flintstones and Jetsons, something like that. I should be a movie creator, yeah, I mean, I got all these awesome ideas, for stuff, not just movies, but also shows, video games, comic books, and even other stuff, merchandise as well. I should work in the industries, who knows. But so yeah, that's one example of how you can make like a Hanna-Barbera crossover movie, But let's say the first couple Hanna-Barbera movies, the first half, like phase one, that can be a couple Hanna-Barbera characters, and then like the final film in that phase can be like a Hanna-Barbera crossover movie. Then you go to phase two and you introduce more Hanna-Barbera characters, and you can make a sequel to some of the old Hanna-Barbera franchises, and at the end of phase two, you got a crossover movie with all of them. Phase three, a sequel to some Hanna-Barbera films from the earlier phases, introducing new Hanna-Barbera characters, and phase three, crossover movie, and phase four, so on and so forth. You know what I'm saying? This is something that the MCU has been doing for years, and that's something that Warner Brothers should have done. The problem with Warner Brothers, and this is one of the reasons why not only the Hanna-Barbera cinematic universe failed, but also the DCU, why that failed as well, because Warner Brothers unfortunately had no leadership. It had no captain. They didn't have a Kevin Feige, and I guess they pretty much now they kind of do with James Gunn, even though it kind of feels like there still doesn't seem to be much as right now, but they're just starting out. So, and like with DC, one of the reasons why, because and before Warner Brothers, before when they had no captain, no leadership, no Kevin Feige, everybody pretty much wanted to do their own thing. They wanted to make a Joker film. They wanted to make a movie with different DC characters. So there was no leadership. The DCU had no leadership. Zack Snyder, I guess maybe he probably could have been the closest thing to a Kevin Feige, a captain, leader, but there wasn't much right there. The DCU just kind of threw everything in there in the pot and just expect it all to work. They didn't bother to give each of these characters their own solo movies. Aquaman, The Flash, Cyborg, just throw them all in Justice League. Okay, sure, they made cameo appearances as Batman v Superman, but that still didn't give us enough to be invested in those characters. And let's say like you had an Aquaman movie like after the Wonder Woman movie, and then a Flash movie after the Aquaman movie, and not be based on the paradox thingy, like what the 2023 movie did. and Cyborg, you give Cyborg out of his own solo movie, or have him make an appearance, or have Cyborg like go the Hawkeye route and just make a cameo appearance in either the Flash or the Aquaman movie, like how Hawkeye made a small cameo appearance in the Thor movie, and then when you do Justice League, you get all of them together. We are investing in these characters. We saw these characters each their solo movies, and now we're gonna see all of them team up. That's pretty much why the 2012 Avengers movie became a huge hit, because Marvel took their time. They built up their characters, they built up the world, and they did all this stuff. You know, and stuff and 20 and it laid everything kind of led up to the 2012 Avengers movie, and that movie was a huge success. It became a huge wide phenomenon. And the MCU kept doing more from that. Yeah, they made sequels to some of their old movies, but then each phase, started to introduce new characters, and those new characters will be added to future Avengers, crossover movies, and that's something that the DCU and the Hanna Barbera cinematic universe should have done. And let's hope that the Nintendo Illumination cinematic universe that does that as well, something like that. And like back with the Hanna Barbera cinematic universe, that's exactly what it should have done. Now imagine if an alternate timeline where they did do something like this, like let's say they had the first movie is a Scooby movie, and so since that Scooby Doo is the most arguably the most popular and more well known Hanna Barbera IP out of all of them for sure. I guess there's no arguing right there. Scooby Doo is the more well known, more popular, more moneymaker Hanna Barbera property, IP out there. Out of all of them. That can be your start point. So the Scooby movie should have been a standalone Scooby Doo movie. Sure, it would have been another typical generic Scooby Doo animated movie. Scoob and the gang, they team up. They something mysterious happens. And evil is happening. And Mr. Inc. needs to try to unsolve it. They solve mess, and they found this character. The villain was this character who was introduced earlier that we thought was one of the good guys, was an innocent bystander, innocent person, but turned out to be a villain later on. Something like that we see in a generic Scooby Doo movie. Or they could probably introduce some supernatural elements to it, like how the first Scooby Doo movie did with that whole soul thingy, where Scrappy Doo tried to use this kind of like ancient energy source power thing to rule the world, to command monsters and rule the world for thousands of years. Trying to sell Scooby Doo's soul, and trap Mr. Inc. Capture Mr. Inc. Get revenge on them because they abandoned him years ago. Yeah. So yeah. So and the Scooby Doo movies, they have kind of featured some supernatural elements to them. So yeah. So that's a single Scooby movie. It doesn't have to be like just a generic, typical run-of-the-mill Scoob movie, or evil villains. An evil villain is disguised. I mean, a person is a person in disguise. So they could probably do that if they want to add like some kind of supernatural element, like this person is using this supernatural element thing to take over the world, and Mr. Inc. needs to stop them or something. Something like that. Oh, sorry about that. Hey guys, I'm back. I am so sorry. My dad walked in once again to do something, so and he and my brother were talking. So I'm sorry if you guys heard them or something. Again, my apologies. A lot of things in this house is pretty much out of my control, but I try to do the best that I can, with stuff, But anyways, like back to what I said, the Scoob movie, it doesn't have to be a typical that kind of straight up Scooby movie you've seen, It can add like some supernatural stuff. I think some of the other animated Scooby Doo movies did feature some supernatural stuff, where some of them were just kind of fake or something like that. It's been a while since I've seen an animated Scooby Doo movie in a while, so I might check some of the others out to see. I still haven't been to see the crossover with Courage the Cowardly Dog and the one with DC Crypto the Super Dog. I did borrow those from the library, but I never got around to watch them, unfortunately, and I ended up returning them. Silly me sometimes. Yeah, so that could be one example, And then, for the Blue Falcon movie, or if you want to do, You don't have to do just a Blue Falcon movie right after. You could do, I was just doing that as an example. Since Blue Falcon was kind of heavily present in the Scoob movie. I just kind of did that as an example. After a Scoob movie, you could do like a Yogi Bear movie or a Hong Kong Phooey movie. One of those two, Hong Kong Phooey or Yogi Bear. They'll probably go with like something like Yogi Bear because Hong Kong Phooey isn't really a popular well known brand. You know, it's ending with Blue Falcon and Dynamite. You know, so next can be like a Yogi Bear movie, then then a Blue Falcon movie or whatever you want to do next after that. Top Cat or something. Or you want to do Flintstones or Jetsons. Or like if you do like a Jetsons movie, like the Jetsons movie can be like, it could be like somewhat of a time travel like movie where they get stuck in the past and they end up in the world of just Hanna Barbera characters, something like that. Or that could be like, or the Jetsons being stuck in the past or something like that, time travel or something that could be something used for a Hanna Barbera crossover movie. Like Jetsons, they end up in the past somehow and they need to find this relic or something like that that involves time travel or math science that's doing something with time travel and they need to stop them and they end up running to other Hanna Barbera characters and then either they recruit the Hanna Barbera characters to help them or the Hanna Barbera characters offer to help them and then go through time supplement. Then they end up in the era of the Flintstones and that could be where the climax, the final battle can take place. Something like that. Something like that. These are just ideas. And now I think about it. If Hanna Barbera did went down this route like in Ocean Timeline or something, I could probably see this as like the original Pixar. This Hanna Barbera cinematic universe could be to them like what Pixar is to Disney. That kind of animated, franchise or something. Like if we were to call it, we could call it like Hanna Barbera animated productions, something like that. Yeah, Hanna Barbera animated productions. How about that? That could be like to Warner Bros. Like what Pixar is to Disney. Their animation studio that makes a lot of films. Now Pixar, we don't. I don't think all the movies take place in the same universe. I think there is rumors and they're applied that maybe they probably do, but I don't think it's been confirmed. I don't think they do. Like Toy Story, Monsters Inc., Finding Nemo, The Incredibles, Cars. Yeah, I'm sure. I don't think the Cars definitely don't exist in the same world as the Pixar movies before, even those after it. Maybe they could probably do something about universe hopping or something like that, and that's pretty much the only way I can see them like existing like in the same world or something, or not the same world, universe or the same country or something, or maybe like if they want to do a crossover film with all those Pixar characters, like they do like where they jump through universe and stuff like that, multiverse, if they want to do something like that, if they want to do a crossover from all the Pixar movies, something like that. But I could see a Hanna-Barbera cinematic universe being like, to Pixar, being like Warner Brothers Pixar, Hanna-Barbera animated productions, something like that. We should probably make that as a thing, Hanna-Barbera animated productions. Think about it. Just picture it. That's global greatness right there. And also, do you remember, that test footage of Scoob that showed Scooby and Shaggy meeting Blue Falcon and Dynamite, and Dynamite takes their chips and walks away with it, and Scoob is like, "Hey man, get your own bag." That kind of feels like to me, that feels like that could be like someone like those Pixar small short little teasers that we would see, like you remember like the Bugs Life teaser where the bugs are sitting on this leaf and then the green one, he sits on it and then it starts to collapse and they all fall, something like that. Or Monsters Inc. where Mike and Sully are open the door and at the end Mike is like, Sully, because the dog's coming after him and Sully opens the door and grabs him, and even Finding Nemo, where Marlin's trying to actually fists for directions and Dorothy scares him away, and even in The Incredibles where Mr. Incredible he's trying to get dressed, and some of the others, Cars, The Cars one I really like. That one really got me, and I really dig the song playing in the background when show the cars racing. You know, that test footage of Scoob feels like that in a way to me. And I think in a picture, what if they did something like that? Like what if a Scoob they like Scoob teaser just showed Scoob being Scoob and them Scoob like Scoob Creature Scoob and Shaggy doing something and also Toy Story. I forgot what was the Toy Story what the first Toy Story did, but Toy Story 2 also had you know Buzz, Woody and Buzz talk about Buzz like whoa. Toy Story, Buzz Lightyear in the song "Boys Back in Town," and the Green Aliens stuff. And Toy Story 3, when they're making a logo, and Woody does something hard work and stuff, and Buzz does it better. And Toy Story 4 has all the characters, holding hands and dancing around. And Forky, he like I'm not real, something like that. I forgot what it was. And Woody's like, come on, let's get him or something. Something like that. What if Hanna Harbera, their solo movies did something like that, Like for Scoob can feature Scooby and Shaggy like eating something and then get scared by something or something. Or remember that the very first teaser for I think it was the live action Scooby Doo movie featured going on about a haunted house and a character like we see his black silhouette and we think it's Batman, but it's turned out to be Scooby. And Scooby's like, move me? Ah, no. Yeah, something like that, And like if they want to do a crossover movie, like what they want to do Scoob team up with Falcon, like they can have that right there be like its very first teaser, that little small test footage, And also in that test footage, Blue Falcon does kind of sound totally different and seem to act totally different, than what he did in the Final Lights film because now in the Final Lights film, we know the Scoob movie, it's not actually the actual Blue Falcon, it's his son Brian. So in the test footage, we can assume that that test footage is like Brian's father, the original Blue Falcon, because the way he sounds old. Blue Falcon sounds like an old character, basically, and Brian, voiced by Mark Wahlberg, who I met by the way, awesome dude. He sounds like a young dude, arrogant and prideful, full of himself, something like that. That's kind of what he somewhat was a little bit in a way. And, they could have done something like that. So I think the Blue Falcon that test footage was actually the original Blue Falcon because it's the way he sounded. He had a rough, old, gruff voice. Compared to the young person voice we heard in the final version from his son Brian. So I assume that test footage it was actually the original Blue Falcon for sure. That's just what I think. And I know that Scoob was originally going to have other stuff, maybe have more appearances from other Hanna-Barbera characters. I think, Wacky Racers were supposed to have more of a role in the movie. They were going to have some kind of race scene, but that ended up getting cut. Which I think is kind of good because I don't think, the Scoob was pretty much kind of a cluster mess of a movie to begin with all the stuff, adding all these Hanna-Barbera characters, since a lot of things fell out of place. And some characters' origins were kind of changed. Like, that black chick who was with them, she's actually a character from Captain Caveman and the Teen Angels. Yeah, I think I got the name right. So, they seem to change a lot in the movie. Yeah, because Blue Falcon wasn't the original Blue Falcon. It was his son Brian, The black chick, I forgot her name, unfortunately. Her name escapes me. But she and Captain Caveman worked with these other two female characters, and they were the team Captain Caveman and the Teen Angels, and and she and Captain Caveman don't know each other, so a lot of origins, a lot of stuff kind of messed up, And Scoob, when we first saw Scoob, we thought Scoob was going to be an origin movie, but it turns out that wasn't the case. It was just going to be a Hanna-Barbera crossover movie. But Scoob should have been a straight up Scooby-Doo solo animated movie, and yeah, it could have been, and it could also been like an origin movie story as well for Mystery Inc. and them. Sure, we did somewhat kind of got that with Scooby-Doo: The Mystery Begins, but Scoob could have been something like that, but in animated form, And Scoob should have been the launching point for this animated Hanna-Barbera cinematic universe, Scoob could have been the Iron Man of the anime of the Hanna Barbera cinematic universe. The Iron Man. How Iron Man was the launching point for the MCU. Scoob could have been Scooby Doo. Scoob could have been that for the Hanna Barbera animated cinematic universe. You know, but that kind of failed. So Scoob is pretty much in the same situation as 2011's Green Lantern with Ryan Reynolds. I heard that movie was actually supposed to be a starting point for a DC cinematic universe. DC was basically copying what Marvel was doing because Marvel took a character that wasn't very popular, Iron Man, that not many people were too familiar with, that wasn't really a huge, highly popular character, and made a movie with that character, and that movie made like $1 billion and became a highest grossing movie ever. DC was trying to do that. They did the same thing with Green Lantern, but unfortunately that failed. But I think Green Lantern probably could have been better if they just took like a different approach or something. I don't know. I'm not sure what Green Lantern could have done to be a better movie. Well, I guess it depends. And like the MCU, one of the reasons why they went with Iron Man was because they didn't have the license for other characters, for like the big name characters, Spider-Man, X-Men, Hulk. Those were pretty much owned by other properties. And the same thing with Fantastic Four and a couple others. But this is something that I mentioned in my Mount Rushmore, who are the Mount Rushmore of DC. I mentioned that Spider-Man, X-Men, and Hulk are pretty much like the main popular Marvel characters that are well known worldwide at the time. Not just by comic fans, but also casual fans. That are not, and even some that are probably not non-Marvel fans, not really fans of Marvel comics or Marvel as a whole. But in Iron Man, he unfortunately wasn't hugely popular. Not sure Iron Man had an anime series like the three that I mentioned, and even the Fantastic Four, but that didn't help make them popular though, unfortunately. But the Iron Man, the 2008 movie, definitely helped make the movie popular for sure. Hold on, guys. Hey guys, I'm back once again, and I am so sorry. I really am. The battery on the camera was about to die, and I decided to quickly recharge it. So it should be good now from what I've seen. And so, yeah, from where I left off. Now, I did check, and I just said that, it definitely, the Iron Man movie definitely helped make the movie popular. I meant to say it definitely helped make Iron Man popular. That's what I meant to say. I'm so sorry. I'm getting screwed this confused in the head or something, strange in the head, weird in the head, that kind of stuff, mixing things all on the head. I don't know. But other than that, it's too bad that the Green Lantern 2011 movie, didn't become the launching point for the DC cinematic universe, and too bad that Scoob didn't become the launching point for the Scoob cinematic universe. I guess this was the case even with Valiant Comics with the Bloodshot movie with Vin Diesel. That was supposed to be a starting point to launch the Valiant Comics live action cinematic universe, and that unfortunately bombed. Unfortunately, didn't go anywhere. That got scrapped. Thanos and that brought it existence. So yeah, but overall, I think everything that I said earlier, I think it's what Hanna Barbera should have done. And here's what I wrote down. If you can see it. Well, I see to myself again. You see? This is what I think the Hanna Barbera cinematic universe should have done. It's too bad we never got this. Is camera focusing? Oh, sorry about that. But yeah, it's a bummer that things didn't turn out the way we wanted them to. Things didn't turn out a different way. But that's fine. That's life, I guess. So yeah, what do you guys think? Do you agree with everything I said? Or how do you think that the Hanna-Barbera animated cinematic universe should have been? And also another thing I'm wondering, that canceled Scoob sequel, holiday movie, Scoob holiday something, do you think that has a chance of possibly seeing the light of day? It's already finished and all, but wait, I don't think it's a sequel. I think it's a prequel. It featured the characters as kids, like how the Scoob movie did feature at the earlier half featured the Scoob characters as kids. But do you think that holiday animated movie has a chance to see the light of day like other canceled Hanna Barbera properties? You know, we got The Day the Earth Blew Up, that's been saved, and also Coyote versus Acne, which is great to be saved. It's coming out later on this month. Later on this year, in August. It's coming out on August 28th, which is National Power Rangers Day. Funny enough. Interesting. Yeah, but you think that movie has a chance to be saved and see the light of day? What do you guys think? So hopefully Warner Brothers doesn't screw up this Dr. Seuss cinematic animated universe that they're doing. With the Cat in the Hat being the launching point. Hopefully that movie doesn't bomb and they pull the plug on that cinematic universe like they did with the Hanna-Barbera cinematic universe, and they eventually did later on with the DCEU. Well, the DCEU was a sucking ship later on. No direction and such. And sure, the MCU may be a bit of a mixed bag, but the MCU seems to be doing well, somewhat well. Hopefully, Avengers: Doomsday and Secret Wars becomes amazing movies, and I hear they're gonna reboot after Secret Wars. I don't know how that's gonna turn out, and they're gonna be adding X-Men and all that such. But yeah, I went on long enough, and I think I'm gonna wrap it up because I said a lot, everything that I needed to say. But you guys let me know with everything I said. You guys agree with everything that I said? Do you think this is what Hanna-Barbera, should have done? With everything that I mentioned earlier. Feel free to let me know in the comment section below. And I hope you guys really enjoyed this video. That's it for now. Feel free to like, share, subscribe, and all that jazz. And more videos coming out in the future. So many ideas for videos. Can't wait to share them with you guys. This is Conrad64, and I'll be signing out. Peace out, guys.